the truth is, out of the $25 million that the city got, the city skimmed. That's my term, it's Supervisor Jim DiMartini's term. But the city council took $2.5 million for the administration and supervision of SCAP. And so who is really responsible here? The city council was the bank for SCAP. I mean, they didn't just hand this money over to SCAP. So they failed to adequately supervise the administration of this money. And I think the $2.5 million, $800,000 of that money was for SCAP. There's a lot of NSPs at Athens, as you well know, because of your contact with some of these groups. We found out today that there's another nonprofit that's going to be formed called Modesto Neighbors. And it's being formed by Mike Meridian, who is the, I would call it the organizer for the Loma Neighborhood Association. And their stated purpose now is to form a 501c3, a nonprofit, so that they can go after grants. Now, the Loma Neighborhood Association that Mr. Meridian founded and started had its base in private security. And organizing the neighborhood to sell them private security is probably their motive. So you have nonprofits that are formed for profit.
It's my understanding that SCAP is not the only nonprofit that's received these NSP funds. Would that indicate that there was more money coming into Modesto that was given to other nonprofits that also the city was?
There are. There's three. There are a lot of other nonprofits. It's interesting to me that the newspaper ran this database from the IRS of all the nonprofits that are in the city and county, I guess. But in any event, there are a lot of well-respected people who have nonprofits. So if you're running a nonprofit that's in trouble and you want to clear up the image of the nonprofits, you produce this list of people, and certainly they couldn't be doing anything wrong. And so maybe SCAP isn't doing anything wrong. But we've only hit the tip of the iceberg. It goes much, much deeper than that. The federal government isn't too interested in SCAP. I think they're interested in the city and what the city did with that money.
Sometimes it's hard to tell which comes first, the chicken or the egg. And at first it seemed like SCAP was the first out of the chute, so to speak. And you know, in hindsight, it seems like the perfect nonprofit to have the breaking story for the NSP funds because of Joe Gibbs and his previous history with the law and all of that. But we have a phone going off here in the studio. But there are other nonprofits also that may be under investigation because of the NSP funds. And I'm wondering if the investigation started months ago and the story broke about SCAP because the powers that be did know that an investigation was coming, rather than the SCAP story breaking first, and then that raised a red flag to the feds.
You know, I don't know what the chronology is there, but I'm sure that the Office of the Investigator General, the feds, are in town and they are looking at it. But things have been covered up for so long and so deep. A lot of people are really convinced that nothing will come of this.
Well, with that being said, do you think that people in the public sector who are serving the public should be held to a higher degree of accountability than those who are just average Joes in the neighborhood, in the community,
well,
in the district?
In the district. Well, you know, I think, yeah, I think if the federal government hands over money to the city, and the city then takes $2.5 million to administer and supervise it, then there's a certain amount of accountability that accrues to the people who have that money. After all, they took $2.5 million and put it in the general fund. So I think that eventually thanks to the Voice of Modesto, thanks to the Morning Mirror Show, that we will fill the gap between the newspaper and what they want us to know and when we should know it.
Speaking of the Voice of Modesto, tell me a little bit about that.
The Voice of Modesto started about 2 years ago. And it really was because there was a lack of transparency by the newspaper. And you know, the newspaper's had its own economic problems, which makes it more difficult for them to do investigative reporting. But the animosity that the newspaper has shown to me personally over the years, which I regard as highly hypocritical, they have lost their credibility, I think, when the newspaper editor says that at the Bee they are confused and they are concerned and they are conflicted. And that's their situation. How can we depend upon them to take on the various interests that exist in the community? So we don't ever think we'll supplant the newspaper, but at least we want to develop a platform where people can dialogue and write stories that the newspaper doesn't seem to want to cover. And
you can find the Voice of Modesto at voiceofmodesto.org, is that correct?
Right.
And you also have the Morning Mayor Show, too. That's the radio show we were talking about.
Yeah, the Morning Mayor Show. At one time, I was on KMPH 840, the Patriot. Anyhow, I was there, and then eventually that station went bankrupt. But once again, even the station was cautious about what they would allow on the air. After all, whether it's a newspaper or radio station, they depend on advertising dollars. It's a business, and I understand that. And so, despite in the old days, they really used to say, you know, there's the editorial and then there's the business, and there's a wall between them. That's no longer true, quite frankly.